Okay, let's see what is academic fraud. Okay, this is the procedures for investigating academic fraud. And this is primarily the only one that really relates to me, is the selective suppression of unwanted or unacceptable results. If they don't want you to be heard, they suppress you. And I have been suppressed for 10 years or more now. Okay, my friends, this is kind of interesting because anybody that knows me knows that I brag all the time about, oh, I went to this school, I went to that school, which I did. But I went through a place called Coursera, where you don't have to pay. Now, you don't get a certificate, but you can get the knowledge from what these professors are professing. Now, I found out that the schools that I went to, literally none of them were teaching the truth. And when I presented the truth to them, I was basically crushed. So the new school that I just took on yesterday, I took on a new course. It's about the Big Bang. It's called the Big Bang to Dark Matter, or Dark Energy, actually. And it's a complete recap of everything that we've been told about the history of our universe and how it all started from a big bang of something smaller than an atom, and it's expanding faster than the speed of light now, which is not allowed. But then they say, well, it's not really expanding because the galaxy is moving, so it's moving with the galaxy. So it's expanding, but it's not just expanding by itself. Everything's inflating, and oh, it goes on and on. And the nonsense is insane. So this time I am going to document precisely what I told them and what they said back, because college and education and university is a give and take. It's a learning experience for both sides. It's not just that they dictate to you and say, if you don't say what I told you, then you're stupid. Basically, that's the dictate from professors right now, and from the top universities. The incompetence is absolutely incredible. And here, for these kids to have to pay for the deceit and the fraud, and when I say fraud, let me explain to you what fraud is in academia. And what is their responsibility in academia to the students? The students' responsibility to the professors in the universities to have to pay. But they expect to get truth and honesty and integrity and all the things they expect those professors to have done to prove that they are correct in the things that they are dictating to those students. And they are not correct, and I can prove they're not correct. So I would like to see hundreds rally as the justices hear a fraud case against academia, as a racketeering, as a systemic racketeering ring, basically. Not a single one would speak to me. None. Zero. And I have gone to a lot of different schools. And again, I'm going to document this time because right now they're being nice to me. Oh yeah, you could post up here. You could do anything you want. We're here to help you. We want to hear. And I did. I said, the first thing I said to him, I said, how could you possibly allow, or how could you possibly think that the Hubble telescope is measuring distances in space when space is loaded with dust and it's supposed to be a vacuum? We all know now it's loaded with dust. You people just sweep that under the carpet like dust is hidden. No, it's out there. It's dust, it's light particles, it's gases, and even Fermilab says, yes, space isn't empty. It's completely packed with what they call a quantum foam. That means that light is slowing down. We're not expanding. In the Mudfossil realm, all of these things I'm showing here, these are solidified body parts, or in this case, a goose's head. And there's this feather pattern, and this is what happened as a result of mud fossils. I have even new species refused to speak to me about this. Every single top university, DNA tested, CAT scan. That's a human lung, and I have human giant body parts that are giants, and they are giants, and there's no way to deny it. The only way is to refuse to examine it, and that's what's been done. That's called academic fraud. Right, this goes back quite a long time ago. I was the first one in the world to get DNA reports done on ancient human mud fossils. And I discovered mud fossils, I named them mud fossils, and I sent them off 3 different samples that I extracted the blood, literally blood, from these, because the blood comes out of them very simple. And there was 3 of them. There was a giant fingertip, 36 inches long. The fingertip itself, a lung, which is this one right here, which is, this pattern is a lung. It's absolutely flawless. And it was saturated with blood. And they're all flat as a pancake on one side, because this happened in the Great Flood. This is what also annoys them, because it goes into religion, and they hate religion. I mean, I'm talking about hate it. The first words out of their mouth was, "What are you, a creationist?" And I said, "I am a scientist." Now follow this through. This was a very, very sophisticated test. This was the first one that was done on ancient DNA samples from humans. And this goes through the whole thing they set up, and the temperatures and the cycles and the times and the gels and the different elutions and densities and all kinds of stuff. And they go through the whole thing. Very, very, very well done. This was a very, very good lab. Helix Biolabs. The only one that I could find that was competent enough to do this work, and they did it fabulously. They checked for negative controls, and I was in contact with the lab very, very closely. And all of this stuff, this is serious quality work. And here's the deal right here. Excellent quality DNA sequence. Excellent quality DNA sequence was obtained from the 36-inch tip and from the lung sample, the lung here. The other hand that I showed was more of a mud fossil. It had taken on too much nucleic invasion. It's a process where other stuff invades, and in certain places they don't invade hardly at all. It seals itself, and the internal contents is almost like new. And that's what happened with that giant fingertip. And the lung is virtually flawless. They found Homo sapien, mitochondrial B, and D loop regions, and they went through all of the sequencing and all this. This was a certified test, a certified lab, and this was Helix Biolabs, and they were absolutely fabulous. Now they wouldn't even look at this. This made no sense, no interest whatsoever for them, to any of these colleges. Now, is it their responsibility to look into something when it's presented to them? I say that would be suppression, because I worked with the top colleges in the United States, and the one I'm going to right now is overseas. But I went to a lot of different colleges and universities, which just to see what they had to say and try to engage, and not a single one would engage. That's the key, and that's academic fraud as far as I'm concerned. If they won't look at if their claims are disputed with scientific evidence, which I have presented, and they refuse to examine it, that's suppression. That's suppression. This is the lung. And I drilled down inside the real red bloody spot underneath here and got almost raw blood out of there and sent that off. This one here is another lung I have, and this one is all stripped of its, what they call pleura. It's a coating that coats the lung and protects the contents. Well, the pleura is all eroded off of this, and you're down into the alveoli. You see this here? Those are little holes, that's all this alveoli. And there was still blood in here, and the blood actually ran out right there. That's what happened come out of that lung. These are saturated with blood. The bones like this had blood coming out of them. That's a bone. And it's nucleophilically substituted, invaded by whatever the water and the transition metals and so forth were in this when it was, or were surrounding it when it was entombed. And the blood is just locked in there. When they come out of the ground, they release the blood. Literally, the blood comes out as scabs. And I'm talking scabs. They have exactly the same thing as we have. The same clotting fiber behind the scab. I'm very deep into into the anatomy and so forth. And these are the two holes. There's a black one here running out of that hole was the vein. The red one here running out of that hole was the artery. All right, that's a left hand, and it's 4 feet wide approximately. These are the pads that go around your, this pad right here and a pad here, and the cleave in between is right here. Your thumb goes off this way, the little finger goes off that way. Again, DNA tested. That's a giant human hand, but that's only small compared to my big one. This fingertip is basically flawless. It's 3 feet long. That's the fingernail. I broke this piece off over here because it was so solid you couldn't get any blood out of this. I couldn't get any blood from the outside surface. So I smashed this piece off here, right around the edge of the fingernail. And that, it still has the fingerprints on it. Alright, the fingerprints are right there. That's the piece that came off of the edge of that fingertip. The fingernail is up here, and it wraps around just a little bit of skin, and then you go into the fingerprints, just like ours. Very well, it's a human fingertip. It's human DNA. Mitochondrial DNA was human, and that's all I wanted to know. I didn't want anything where they could recreate these creatures. I wanted to know, was the mother's side, the mitochondrial DNA, human? And it was. And these are the actual sweat pores, and that my fingertip is the same size as one sweat pore. And this was DNA tested, excellent quality DNA, and so was the lung, excellent quality DNA. Now, that's pretty well, first of all, and then anatomically, you can't miss it if you're even 10 years old. Secondly, it's been backed up with DNA tests. Anatomists have looked at it. The chemistry is well understood now. It's nucleophilic substitution, and feldspar is aluminum silicates, and that's what seals the collagens. Collagen in this particular instance, it was a hot water, saltwater flood, and it was because Earth was almost hit by a comet 3,500 years ago, and it created a huge flood, and that's why they're all flat on one side. And this was all recorded by Velikovsky, also destroyed by academics, totally destroyed by academics. He wrote the book in 1950 called Worlds in Collision, where we almost got hit. This is what caused all my mud fossils. Now, Velikovsky didn't know about the mud fossils then. He just knew about all of the existing texts that said this is what happened. And it was everywhere on the earth, so it wasn't just one place, one guy said it. It was every culture, even ones that had no touch with other cultures. They knew about it, these guys knew about it, those guys knew about it, these guys, everybody knew the same story. How did that happen? Velikovsky's the only one that stuck his neck out, and they chopped it right off on him. They forced him to take the book off the bookshelves after 11 weeks on a #1 on a top-selling book, Times top-selling book list. #1, 11 weeks in a row, they forced him to take it off because they didn't like what he was saying. I have never had that kind of influence, so they just ignore me. And they ignore the truth. And that is academic fraud. So I want to see the Supreme Court address this racketeering charge, because this is racketeering, I'm telling you right now. Peer review is nothing more than a whole bunch of racketeers that say, don't let them say a word unless they say what we tell them to say. I see academic fraud. It's quite obvious to me. Suppression of this information is academic fraud. And the suppression of my physics is also academic fraud. I presented that, and that is also indisputable as well. You see this? These are the particles they're talking about from Fermilab. I presented this to them 5, 6 years ago, minimum, and they refused to discuss it. I'm very upset about the mud fossils, but I'm just as upset about the the light acceleration experiments we did. We accelerated light, we split the particles, we found the exact same particles that Fermilab is looking for, which is the muon and electron neutrino, those two neutrinos. They're attached together in light, two sets of them, and when they crush at our Venturi, they actually separate. You get fission and fusion. This is the holy grail of everything, and this is Fermilab refuses to talk to me about this. What is their obligation? This is what they were set up to do, is to find this, and we found the particles. Now, that's the problem. It upsets them. Secondly, space is completely saturated. Empty space isn't empty. The Hubble Space Telescope is worthless to say, oh, we're 360 billion years old or whatever. The light is traveling, and the redshift is because everything's moving away. No, it's not. It's because it's slowing down, because empty space is not empty. Things are being collided with continuously. They're flickering on and off, exactly what Don Lincoln says at Fermilab. Empty space experiences similar activity, subatomic particles winking in and out of existence. That's because they're being collided with by other particles, slowing down. You know, I was told by academia that God and all that nonsense in the past was just all craziness. Well, I don't think it is. In their greed, these false teachers will exploit you with deceptive words. The long-standing verdict against them remains in force, and their destruction does not sleep. Well, I could see where that's possibly quite true. You know, from what I have found, the ancient texts are very, very believable at this point. I mean, there's things in there that obviously were different long, long ago. But they wrote of stories that were true, and the things that will happen were still happening back then. It said the priests and all those people were deceiving people and making them do things that was to their own benefit. It's called menticide. They make you work against yourself to benefit those people, just like the false teachers. There was false prophets, and among you today there will be false teachers. And this is what's happened. And they hate God because God is on their case. And if their destruction does not sleep, from what I have read and what I have found, and the giant creatures and so forth, and the dragon in the desert in Morocco and all that stuff, this is all really serious stuff. And they hate this because it takes away from their authority to deceive. All right, here's the giant fish, and there's the dragon that was attacking them. Come up here and look for yourself. There's that dragon right there. He's written about in Apollodorus 1.6.3. His name is Typhon. He was a monster that was created long, long ago. And he runs all the way. This is his head. You see this is his head? This is his throat, runs all the way down. This is the flashy stuff you see on the parades in China and so forth. These are the dragon scales. That's the dragon scales that coat his throat. All this stuff out here is just runoff of the dead, decaying dragon. And his throat runs all the way down into his stomach, which is way back here. And his tail runs all the way back down to here. And these are still dragon scales way out here. Now, if you want to dismiss this because you want to suppress this unwanted information, then you are a fraud.